Stephen King, one of our greatest political figures. No, I'm just kidding. Stephen King, a man who is absolutely one of America's top number one writers of all time, a man who is very controversial in multiple things. However, a man who is absolutely packed full of wisdom when it comes down to writing and how to write a story. And we are going to go over the top 10 writing tips from Stephen King for writers and screenwriters, according to this video. Let's review it together and see what we think.
You go where the story leads you, and in this case, I had no idea it was going to have a dark conclusion.
My idea about a good idea is one that sticks around and sticks around and sticks around.
I think the best writers are voracious readers who pick up the cadences and the feel of narration.
And around the time that I turned 17 or 18, the nail fell out of the wall because there were so many rejection slips on it, so I got a bigger nail.
I just look for ideas that I really enjoy, something that I really want to live with for a while, like the story about the people under the dome.
My brother and I were both readers, and at some point along the way, I decided that I wanted to be a writer. So I started to type up stories on an old typewriter that I had, and I started to send them to magazines, and I pounded a nail into the wall, and I'd get the rejection slips back, and I would put them on that nail, and around the time that I turned 17 or 18, the nail fell out of the wall because there were so many rejection slips on it, so I got a bigger nail. And if there's any secret that I know to success, it's if you don't succeed, get a bigger nail.
Yes. That is so true. If you've ever tried to go down the traditional path of publishing, it can be one of the most stressful things in the world, mainly because the constant number of rejections you'll be getting, plus how you'll be rejected. So if you don't know, the traditional path to publishing is when a publishing house takes your book and does a mass print and a mass distribution and a mass marketing campaign that they pay for, and all you literally have to do is just your side, which is, you know, helping them out in any way that they say, hey, we need you to market the book here, appear here, etc. So in order to do that, though, like, let's pretend you want to get your book published at like HarperCollins. HarperCollins and any other major publishing industry goes through literary agencies upon which you have to approach first in order to get the chance to be recognized by HarperCollins, because HarperCollins is not going to listen to you directly. They're going to listen to the agencies, and the agencies fill out or filter out all of the writers that they think are not going to make it. So you approach a literary agency that is affiliated with HarperCollins, and you approach an agent on that agency's site that represents your work. So if you write fantasy fiction, for example, there'll probably be 2 or 3 people there that represent fantasy fiction, maybe just even one. You go to their page on their website, and you'll see their way on how to submit your manuscript to them. The first thing is going to be usually something called a query letter, which is basically a 1 page, which is going to be just a brief 5-sentence overview of yourself, a brief 5-sentence overview of your book, and sometimes about a 10 paragraph or 10 sentence paragraph like synopsis of your book. They're going to ask for things like your word count. They're going to ask for like what inspired you to write the story, possibly. But usually it fits all into 1 page. It's the most stressful letter you'll ever have to write, because if you're someone like me who writes a lot, writing a 1 page something is so stressful, because it's like, how could I possibly put my book into this 1 page without making it sound like every other fantasy book, right? And then if they like it, they'll usually ask for the first 5 chapters. And if they like the first 5 chapters, they'll say, hey, send me the rest of the manuscript. And if they like the whole manuscript, then they say, I would like to represent you as your agent. You sign a contract. They pitch your book to HarperCollins or to any other major publishing house that they think would be good, that can make a good contract with them that they are recognized by. And then after that, you make this big, huge signing day. It's the glorious day that every writer wants to have. And uh, many, though, sadly don't reach that because the agencies usually will have on their page, it'll take us 8 to 12 weeks, or sometimes, if you're lucky, 4 to 8 weeks to get back with you. And sometimes they'll even say on there a small little clause that says, hey, if you don't hear back from us by the end of week 8, consider that yeah, consider it a rejection. So, so a silent rejection. It's so brutal because you really wish that they could get back with you, and some of them do. Some of them are courteous enough to write back to you, which is always nice because you can at least check off on your list. Okay, that one didn't work. Okay, not that agency and not that agency. The rest you're just in limbo for 3 months until you finally hear nothing, and then you realize, okay, I gotta scratch that through. So, in order to be a writer, you are going to go through a lot of rejection. You just have to get used to it. Great advice by Stephen King. When yeah, when life gets you hard, get a bigger nail.
Yes, there is something I want to ask you.
All right.
How the f do you write so many books so fast? I think, I've had a really good 6 months. I've written 3 chapters, and you
3 chapters.
You
Yeah,
finished
but
3
6
books
months?
in that time.
Come on.
Here's the thing, okay?
No wonder people are so upset they haven't got the new book
there are
out
books
yet.
and there are books. The way that I work, I try to get out there and I try to get 6 pages a day. So with a book like End of Watch, and when I'm working, I work every day, 3-4 hours, and I try to get those 6 pages and I try to get them fairly clean. So if the manuscript is, let's say, 360 pages long, that's basically 2 months' work. It's concentrated, but but that's assuming that it goes well.
And you do hit 6 pages a day?
I usually do.
You don't ever have a day where you sit down there and it's like constipation and you write a sentence and you hate the sentence and
Okay.
you check your email and you wonder if you had any talent after all, and maybe you should have been a plumber. Don't you have days like that?
No, I mean, there's real life. You know, I can be working away and something comes up, and you have to basically get up and you have to go to see the doctor, or you have to take somebody a care package, or you have to go to the post office, because whatever. But mostly I try to get the 6 pages in, although entropy tries to intervene.
You go where the story.
Okay, so that's good. I personally would encourage going by word count and not by page count. And the reason why is because if someone like higher up who you're trying to pitch your book to for representation, they're not going to ask you how many pages is your book. They're going to ask you what is the word count. So, for example, I think like the first Hunger Games book is slightly over 100,000 words, something like that. So, just to kind of give you an idea, now George R. R. Martin's books, some of them actually are. One of them I think is like probably 300,000 something. Another one of his books, like the longest book I think he ever wrote, was 422,000 words long. So it's not a bad idea to go by 6 pages if that's what you want to do. But I prefer to go by something that's more of a word count, because in there you can begin to measure, hey, is this going to be a novel or is this going to be a novella? Usually your standard novel is going to be somewhere between 80,000 to 150,000 words. It just depends on the genre. It depends on the story itself. With page, you really can't do that, because people ask me all the time, well, how many pages is your book? How many pages is your book? It's really hard to tell because it depends on what the page size is, what the font size is, the line spacing that goes in between. All these things can make or break like a book by how, like, either this thick or this thick. It just depends, right? So 6 pages is fine, though. If that's what you want to go by, 6 pages is good. But honestly, if you have in your head a word count size, that's not bad either. And preferably that's the one that's going to translate into the broader writing world, such as with literary agencies.
Lead you. And in this case, I had no idea it was going to have a dark conclusion. You know, you were mentioning before we got going Salem's Lot. And when I started that story, I thought to myself, well, this will be the opposite of Dracula, where the good guys win. In this book, the good guys are going to lose, and everybody's going to become a vampire at the end of the book. And that didn't happen, because you go where the book leads you, and this one just led me into a very dark place. I didn't even want to go there. I want people to find it out for themselves.
I mean, yeah, I can see where he's saying here. So there are two types of writers out there. There are planners and there are pantsers. That's the names for them. Basically, a planner is someone who's going to write an outline, bullet point by bullet point, all the way down the different chapters, and then what happens in those chapters. And they're going to do that from start to finish for their entire book. Someone who's more of a pantser is more kind of like what Stephen King is saying. You'll sit down, you'll just start writing it and kind of see where the story leads you, kind of like someone leading someone else in a dance, right? The simple touch and feel of the hand on someone's back can let them know, oh, we're gonna go for a spin now. Oh, we're gonna go for a dip. So that's kind of what it is. For me, I'm somewhere kind of in the middle of the two. Like I'm more of a pantser. So, which is in my head, I know that I see that the story starts here, and you're gonna have this point which has this big event, and then you're gonna have this over here which is this big event, and this big event, and this big event, and this big event. And then usually in between there's a means of connecting the dots, and that's kind of where the series kind of flows. Sometimes I'll write some notes at the end of each chapter to say, hey, do this in the next chapter. And sometimes that just won't even happen. Sometimes I won't even go by those notes. It just, the story didn't pan out that way. Sometimes I'll think, okay, this person is going to get wounded right here. The person never got wounded. And then this person over here, in my head, they were never going to get wounded whatsoever. But then suddenly there's an arrow in their back, right? And they have to open field surgery later on and hope the person lives, right? So it's all these things that kind of happen. In case in point, if you ever read book one, when Charles and Virginia first enter into Alaythia, they're around a campfire. Charles is bandaging up Virginia's wound, and they fall asleep. And then they later on, they're being led by a guide to the Great Canyon, and then you have that scene where Virginia is attacked by Darkrai in the morning around the campfire, right? So originally, when I first wrote that, both campfire scenes were going to be in the same chapter. So there was no tribe of the Naomi. There was no intimate time between Charles and Virginia getting to know each other better and hearing Virginia's backstory. There's just going to be, they enter through the gate, they fall asleep, they wake up the next day, Darkrai's there because they just entered into into Alaythia. He's in his werewolf form and he's going to attack them. It was all going to be on the same, like literally the next day, all around the same campfire. But that didn't happen. They happened on two separate campfires, is what happened. And because of that, I got to give some backstory of the Naomi, which became very important because of the dove. I got to add in the prophecy, which is critically important because it's one of the greatest things that they use to cling on to hope. I got to give more of a backstory for Virginia. I wanted to introduce her backstory, but I wanted to introduce it later, and right then was the perfect time. It was a very emotional scene where she got to connect with the guy that she's in love with. And uh, yeah, it just opened up this whole new realm, wow. Sometimes you just got to let the story follow you. But hey, to each his own. If you're a planner or you're a pantser, the one thing that separates those two from someone who doesn't write the story is someone who writes the story. So no matter which one you are, write the story.
But in any case, John Irving, when he was talking to a bunch of would-be writers one time, said that the first thing he does with a book is write the last line.
Oh.
And I heard that and I just went,
No.
Like that. Because to me, that's
horrible.
kind of like spoiling the fun.
Yeah.
I like to start with a little bit of an idea. They come from different places. Sometimes they stick around and you want to do something. Sometimes they don't. But the idea is to start with something and just start to go with it, And that's the joy of finding things out, of having characters that just sort of walk on and become a big part of the story. I feel
You can't steer a ship that's not willing to move. You have to drop those sails, and you just have to start by catching the wind. You just have to open up your computer or whatever writing device you use and just start writing. For me, book one didn't start with chapter one. It didn't even start with the prologue. I just started writing one scene where Virginia walks to a balcony in the upstairs, looks down to the foyer, and starts talking to her uncle. Her name wasn't even Virginia at that time, and Andrew's name wasn't Andrew. I'm not going to tell you what their original names were, but but I just started writing that one scene, and she goes back to her room, and she has the moment where she feels something in her spirit talking to her almost, and she looks down the hallway at the spiral staircase at the end of the hallway, and she's just driven by this. Oh, I have to know what's up there. Something's up there, and it's calling me to it. Which you know what that is, of course, later on if you've read it or listened to it. But yeah, just start. Just start.
like you have to follow the characters and you have to follow the story where it leads. And the last thing that I want to do is to spoil a book with plot. So, you know, I think
right.
the plot is the last resort of bad writers as a rule. I'm a lot more interested in character and situation, and you'll follow it where it goes. And so, anyway, I had no idea that Tad was going to die, and I had no idea that Danny and his mother were going to live. But I was really glad when they did. People will say, "Do you keep a notebook?" And the answer is, I think a writer's notebook is the best way in the world to immortalize bad ideas. My idea about a good idea is one that sticks around and sticks around and sticks around. It's like, to me, it's like if you were to put breadcrumbs in a strainer and shake it, which is what the passage of time is for me. It's like shaking a strainer. All this stuff that's not very big and not very important just kind of dissolves and falls out. But the good stuff stays. You know, the big pieces stay. I had the idea for Under the Dome when I was teaching high school back in 1973, and it was just too big for me, and I was too young for it. And I wrote about 25, 26 pages and put it away. There's a scene at the beginning of this book where this woodchuck gets cut in half when this dome comes down over this town. I had written that part when I was in my early 20s and just sort of recreated it from memory when I wrote the book. So the good stuff stays.
So does
Okay, so I couldn't agree and disagree more. All right, here's what I mean by that. I'm the polar opposite of this, okay? I believe that having a notebook is going to be one of your greatest assets you can ever have as a writer. Are you going to immortalize bad ideas? Yes. Are you going to immortalize good ideas? Yes. And just like how he said though with the sift, sometimes writing down your ideas when they pop into your head in some kind of a notebook, whether they are terrible or amazing, is one of the ways of eventually sifting out the bad ideas. Here, hang on, let me show you. So here's my notebook. It's made by a company called Lockbee, which this is, by the way, not a sponsor. Don't know if you can see that. Hang on. Oh, focus, come on. There, I think you can see it now. All right, it's by a company called Lockbee. This is by far one of the greatest things I've ever got. Actually, a gift from my parents from years ago. I went on a quest, my own perfect quest, to find the perfect notebook for me for my writing path. And no matter what I did, I couldn't find the right one. I would try to go and just find like the regular disposable ones that you would just like, or the like, not disposable, like the really like the ones you can buy for like a few cents at like Walmart or something like that. The big ones, you know. I try to find those. I try and find like a leatherback one. And no matter what I did, no matter which one I chose, it just wasn't right. I knew I needed to have one that I could have multiple of, small enough to where I can carry in like a satchel or a sling or a backpack and carry with me everywhere. And it was this bad boy right here. And even before I finished book two, long before I even started writing, long before I started picking back up with book two, I carried this thing with me everywhere. I was in it was a time in my life where um, I was, changing career paths. Uh, I was, trying to, uh, you know, choose a new path for my life. And during that time, I was going through an IT school, and I was driving around doing Uber Eats as a side hustle, and I would be carrying this thing with me in the passenger beside me, behind like a box that I would carry all the food in. And I every time I have an idea, I quickly pull up my phone and set a reminder, remind me in 10 minutes for this, this, and this. I pull over into a parking lot after I was done delivering the food. I'd pull this out, I'd open it up, and I just write down book two, this and this happens. This and this, someone says this quote, it's this quote. I don't even know who's going to say the quote. It's going to be either this person, or this person. But write it down so I don't forget, right? I rarely go back through and read the notes. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. Oftentimes I end up writing the note more than once because I have the same idea more than once, so therefore it's probably a good idea. But I literally have multiple notebooks inside of here, and each one is basically a hodgepodge of. I'm trying not to reveal anything either. This is hard. Come on. There. So look like this. Some of them are have lines, some of them have dots, etc. And again, this is not a promotion of this company at all, but it's really great because some of these notebooks have ideas that I know want to be in the book. I thought they were going to be in book two, some of them, but it turns out some of them didn't. They're going to be like, okay, that's going to be more of a book three thing. Are you going to immortalize bad ideas? Yes, this notebook's full of them. Are you going to immortalize good ideas? Yes, this book is full of them. Are some of those good ideas going to appear in your book? Yes. Many of the things I've written down in here are now in book two. And some of them are going to be in book three, I have no doubt. So, I think every writer should go ahead and write them down. And whether they're good or bad, let the story lead you. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Does that mean that writing can be taught, can be learned?
It can be learned, but I'm not sure it can be taught. It's a self-taught kind of thing. I think the best writers are voracious readers who pick up the cadences and the feel of narration through a number of different books, and you begin by maybe copying the style of writers that really knocked you out. I mean, as a teenager, I read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, so I wrote like H.P. Lovecraft. And in my 20s, I read a lot of Ross MacDonald and Raymond Chandler, so I wrote like those guys. But little by little, you develop your own style. I have a routine.
Yeah, it's so true. Believe it or not, ages ago, I used to hate reading. Hate it. Then my mother gave me this one book by Frank Peretti, and I went from hating to read to literally loving to read. Before then, my mom would even try to entice me, saying like, there are readers out there who love to read so much that they stay up late, disobey their parents by staying up late, and then get grounded from reading because they stayed up late reading. And all I could think of was those lucky kids. That's the mind of my younger self, right? And then she gave me this one book. I got halfway through it. Every chapter started cliffhanging from there on out. And it took me forever to read the first half of the book, but the last half I finished in 1 week. And I was like a completely different person after that. I just wanted to read the next book, and then the next book, and then the next book. And then something even changed inside of me that said, I want to be a writer. I went from hating to read to wanting to become a writer. And the thing that changed that was this one book. Why? Because I found a writing style that showed me the art of writing. That was one of the most valuable things I got out of that book, was that I saw writing as an art for the first time, and it changed everything. All the other books I'd written or read before then were different writing styles, and I just didn't click with them. So if you're a mom or a dad out there and you're trying to get your kid into reading, don't give up. Just get them a different style of book, and that's kind of hard because you probably if you're some people just don't really connect with the writing styles that aren't writers, and that's fine. That's fine. Try different forms of fiction. Just get them involved in something. And hey, you never know. Sometimes those cogs will start turning. And hey, you may have someone who once hated to read to writing 3 books.
Because I think that writing is self-hypnosis, and you fall into a kind of a trance if you do the same passes over and over. So I'll get up, have some breakfast with my wife, watch CNN, and then I'll make my pot of tea and sit down and write for about 3.5 hours. I started with short stories when I was 18, sold my first one when I was about 20, and produced.
So jumping right back to that before we carry on, that's so important to have some kind of a routine down, especially if you're like a full-time parent, you know, a full-time worker. You know, you have all these other obligations in your life, and you're like, I just want to write my story. How do I do that? One of the ways you do it is by literally scheduling something down and doing your best to let nothing interfere with it. It's going to be rough and it's going to require sacrifices. And sometimes you may have to take that 1 hour that you have on this day and put it double on the next day if you can, if you're able to do that. But let's pretend that you're able to write 5 hours a week. And let's pretend that you can only write 500 words per hour. At the end of that week, that's 2,500 words. If you were to write for 4 weeks, that's 10,000 words. So within 1 month, you would have, give or take, just slightly, let's just say 10,000 words a month, you know, give or take, you know. Within just a few months, you could have a novella written. Your average novella is going to be anywhere between 30 to 60,000 words. You don't always have to write a novel. Sometimes you can just write a novella, and sometimes a novella is just good enough for your story. It depends what you want. If you want to write a novel, then don't short yourself by turning it into a novella. That's the worst thing you can do. That's the worst idea. But if you don't know where the story's going, and you're like, there's not really much left of the story, and it's only 45,000 words long, that's good. That's good. You can write that in 4 to 5 months with just 5 hours a week at 500 words an hour.
Pretty much nothing, but well, I wrote a couple of novels, but they were not accepted, and a lot of them were so bad that I didn't even bother to revise them. But the short stories were making money, and I got very comfortable with that format, and I've never wanted to leave it completely behind.
You hear some people who write short stories talk about the fact that in their mind they have these massive novels written about these characters, but really what you see on the page is just a sliver of a story that's in their brain that they could tell. They could write a novel about it in most cases. Is that true?
It is true, and what happens to me a lot of times is I will start out saying this would be a terrific short story idea, and it balloons and becomes a novel. Misery started as a short story, and Gerald's Game started as a short story. Those were things that I thought would be small and grew to a size where they would be a novel.
Misery was such a tough book, man. That was a brutal book. My brother actually started out that way with one of his books. I think he said it was only gonna be either a short story. I think he said it was only gonna be like 5,000 words long, or at least a novella. It eventually grew into a like 100,000 word novel. Just start somewhere and let the story take you.
Long time I felt like movies were a lesser medium because it's like skating. It's all on the surface. Every now and then some movie will be reduced to doing a voiceover, you know, where this character is talking, and I just kind of go,
get the interior life.
Yeah, and I just kind of go, no, you've clearly mistaken this medium for something that it's not. But I came to realize that films have a language of their own, and you have to learn that language, and it isn't enough to say, well, I've watched movies my whole life. You have to write a couple. I started, I think I was probably, I'd been writing novels full-time for about 1.5 years, and I thought to myself, I want to learn how to write movies. I want to try it anyway. So I got a book that was about writing screenplays, and I read it, but at the end, it had a sample screenplay from The Twilight Zone. It showed me what the form was, and that was something real that I could. So I took the Ray Bradbury book, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I wrote a screenplay, and I learned what I was doing. It wasn't for anybody but me. And then a little while later, I wrote a book called The Shining, and it was my third book, and I got contractual rights to write the first draft screenplay. for that. And I did do that, and I found out later that Stanley Kubrick, who had got the rights through Warner Brothers, had already determined that he and a lady named Diane Johnson were going to do the screenplay for The Shining. So they basically, my screenplay went in and they said, no, this won't do, and then they went on to what they really wanted to do, which was fine. I wasn't angry or upset. You're not, after a while. You get thousands of rejection slips before you break through. You kind of get used to that, and it's just part of the game. But the thing is, you learn little by little. So
release books differently now than you used to, in that, like, do you have a different definition of what a successful book is, or on the eve of a book's release, do you pay a special kind of attention to how it will be received or how it's being reviewed?
I think that if you spend too much time worrying about what the audience is going to like, that they're not going to like anything that you do. I just look for ideas that I really enjoy, something that I really want to live with for a while, like the story about the people under the dome. And I get into it most of the time, and then I just have a ball. I never finished a book and felt like I'm glad that's done. I usually finish a book and say, geez, I don't want to say goodbye to these people. And if the people who read it feel the same way, then I'm really happy. Look, you know.
Yeah, that's very true. Andy Weir once said that if he's writing something that bores him to death, then he's not going to be interested in writing it, and therefore the people who are going to be reading it aren't going to be interested in reading it. So he uses that philosophy of like, hey, if I'm not entertained by this, then I'm not going to write it. I'm not going to read it. If I wouldn't enjoy reading it, I'm not going to let anybody else read it then. So that actually happened with me in one of my books, with actually the first book of the Odysseys of Alaythia. There was a chapter that I had where like our main characters are Tristan, Nathaniel, and Soaring Eagle, aka Charles, were all sitting around a campfire, and they were giving their backstory to Virginia, and it was the longest it was the longest chapter in the book, and every single one of my beta readers who read that said, this is the most boring chapter in the entire book. It was so hard to get through, and nothing happened. And I was too lost and overwhelmed with all this backstory detail. And it's one thing if one person flags it. It may be something if two people flag it. But when all of them flag it, that's when I realized, okay, I need to go back and really change this. So I pulled out that chapter and wrote two new chapters in its place. And what went from them all sharing their background story was just Nathaniel sharing part of his story, Tristan sharing pretty much the exact same thing that I had originally, and then Charles, Soaring Eagle, sharing nothing. And it was when they were going back and forth collecting firewood, and then they were ambushed. So it's a really it was I showed those two new chapters to the readers, and they said this is 1,000 times better, And actually, at the very end of that chapter of the second chapter, there's a section where like Charles flies up into the trees, Virginia climbs into the rickshaw, and Tristan's teasing her like, I spy with my little eye something beginning with L, something with love, and then she climbs back in and just kind of like rolls her eyes and says goodnight. That was actually the original words of the big massive chapter. It's like the only thing that I kept. Everything else though was like gutted, and even like what the section that came after that with Darkcry and Spirit Claw, when they were kind of like hunting them or stalking them from the shadows in the woods, that actually was written later on as well. So that one little sliver though, I still kept those few paragraphs in there, and so just kind of goes to show you sometimes gutting an entire chapter is just sometimes what needs to happen.
A lot of these interviews, the question that's the worst is people will say, where do you get your ideas? I don't know where I get them, and if I did, man, would I tell you? I mean, Jesus, they've been good to me. All I know is that I sit down and I turn on the machine, and there's always that first 10 minutes that's like smelling a dead fish or walking into a monkey house. And then something will click a little tiny bit, and that leads to something else. And it's like until it's going faster and faster. And then you hit this kind of escape velocity. You're gone. The world, the normal mundane, sort of stupid world where you got to do the breakfast dishes and you got to make the beds, you know, and you got to worry about getting the kid to the dentist. All that's gone. But there's a place where you have to walk away from it because it's so kind of addictive. That otherwise, you might just sit there and skip meals and just be lost in that world. And you wouldn't want to do that because that's sort of the way crazy people are in institutions. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay, I confess, I've skipped meals before because I would just get so involved in the writing. I would justify it by saying, hey, I had a protein shake, right? But yeah, sometimes that doesn't really justify a good, nutritious dinner for sure. But no, that's the greatest feeling in the world is when you get so involved in the work that that you just kind of everything else kind of zones out. For me, to help me get into that zone, sometimes what I do is I find some music on YouTube that's just like usually like some kind of euphoric or ethereal kind of music that just gets you into the zone. Um, and like if I need a scary scene, I'll play something that sounds scary, you know, or if it's something that's like really soft and romantic, I'll play something that's really soft and melodious, you know. If it's something that's really sad, I'll play something really sad. And you know, the there's actually some songs that I would actually play from different bands that I liked for one of them. Like there's one band, what was it? Flyleaf was the name of the band, and they had this song called um, "Stay Close," I believe it was. And in book one, there's a scene where Virginia leaves her bed and walks downstairs and grabs the sword from the knight. I would just put my headphones on and blast that song loud and play it over and over and over again until that scene of her dancing on the across the wooden floor with that sword was over. And once it was done and Tiffany appeared in near the kitchen threshold, that's when I stopped the song. But I knew I had to play that song for some reason to get me in the mood for writing that one scene. And I'm glad I did because the scene uh, was better than I thought it would be in my imagination. It was good to see it. All right, so there we go. The top 10 tips from Stephen King. So, what were some of your favorites? Did you have a favorite? Is there something that I said that you think should be different, honestly? But yeah, love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a like, subscribe, and hey, if there's something else that you want to review, comment it down below. I'd love to review it. All right, take care, guys. Bye bye.